Today I get to talk about my very favorite art form, tattoos! This is going to be the first video in a series of 8 in which I talk about tattooing for the sake of people who are interested in getting tattooed but maybe don't have a lot of experience with it yet. Why is it going to be 8 videos? Well, because I have 8 tattoos. In each video I will take a close look at one of my tattoos and talk about my own experiences. Well, actually I have 7.5 tattoos, but you're going to have to wait until the 8th video to hear that messed up story. In this first video, I'm going to look at the 2 major non-religious reasons people use when they argue against getting tattoos. I say non-religious because there are religious reasons that people use, and it's just rarely worthwhile to argue against religious ideology. Now, there are also the other obvious reasons, like you're too young, too broke, you're too drunk, but there's no real need to talk about those ones. So we're going to look at the 2 reasons. The first one being, how do you think that tattoo is going to look on you when you're old? Now, the valid part of that particular argument is that, yeah, over time tattoos do fade. They might blur a little bit as the ink sort of gets absorbed into your body very slowly over time, or if you're exposed to a lot of sun or whatever else. The tattoo is definitely not going to look as fresh and sharp as the first year or so after you get the tattoo. However, that's just not a good enough reason for me personally to not get one. And there are a couple of reasons. First of all, I think tattooed older people look amazing. Even if the tattoos themselves aren't super sharp anymore, the overall aesthetic I think looks great. I clearly recall being in Walmart one time and seeing this lady who was at least in her 70s, maybe even older, and she had just tons of tattoos and she looked so badass. I just loved that look. And you see the pictures of these other kind of old-timey black and white photos of these older people who have these tons of black and gray tattoos, and they just look really great. And even if you have a bunch of tattoos when you're 70, 80, and they just don't look very good anymore, maybe they weren't super well done, maybe you didn't take care of stuff like sun exposure on your skin over the years, and they don't look very good, but you're 70 or 80. Are you gonna be that worried about what you look like at that point? Is your physical appearance going to be one of your major concerns in your life? I don't see that being the case, but that's just me. So that's what I think about that particular argument. Before I go on to the second one, I'll talk about my very first tattoo experience. Now, I was living up in Northern Ontario. I had just gotten my first paramedic job up in the Sault Ste. Marie area, although I was stationed an hour east of the city of Sault Ste. Marie in a tiny little town called Thessalon. And I was 20 years old. I was finally making some money, and I could finally go out and get my first tattoo. So I found a shop in Sault Ste. Marie. I found a design that I wanted to get, and I thought, I'm ready to get my first tattoo. This is the only tattoo I'm not going to show you in this video series because it's mostly covered up by a partially finished back piece at this point, so there's not a lot of point in seeing it. But trust me when I say that it ended up being a very bad tattoo. My very first mistake going in was selecting just kind of a generic standard design. There's nothing original or interesting about it. It was just a design I picked out that I asked the artist to do an exact copy of. So there's nothing artistic or original or fun about the design itself. Now, the second problem was the actual tattoo artist. When I made the hour-long drive into Sault Ste. Marie for my tattoo appointment, I arrived there and the artist said, well, I don't know if I'm gonna have time to do it today. He said, my daughter's having some problems at school. She's being bullied by other kids. I want to show up there when school's over on my motorcycle and show them all that she has this badass dad and kind of intimidate these other kids that are bullying my daughter, and school ends in an hour. I don't know if I'm gonna have time to do this, but I had just made the hour-long drive into the city and I was super excited to get my first tattoo, and I wasn't really willing to put it off, and I said, well, let's get done what we can get done today. So he sat down and he proceeded to do a rush job of this tattoo. It was a solid black tattoo and he had gotten the outline in okay, but then when he was shading it in, he was just hurrying to finish it. And when it ultimately healed, it ended up being this blotchy black and gray piece. So while it was supposed to be a solid black, it ended up having these shades of gray where where some parts were inked in well and others weren't, and it was just a bad looking piece. You'll see my second tattoo, which is also a little bit cringe-worthy, in my next video, but to finish up this video, we'll look at that second issue that most people use to argue against getting tattoos, which is, how do you know that this thing which is meaningful to you now is going to be meaningful to you later on in life? How do you know you're not going to get stuck with this thing on your body that is totally meaningless to you now? And again, there's validity to that particular concern. The fact is that if you're a thinking, intelligent person who looks to improve yourself and who looks to learn about life and grow even as you get older, you are going to change fundamentally as a person. Who you are now is not going to be the same as you were 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, look back in your own life at who you were 15 years ago, and you'll probably see a big difference. And you'll see a difference in what is meaningful to you now and what is no longer as meaningful. That's just the way you are if you're a person who grows over time. And that's the case for me. I'll show you a beer-related tattoo that I got in one of my future videos, for which the meaning has changed as time has gone on. And that's okay though. For me, tattoos are almost like a history or a journal of what has been significant and meaningful to me throughout my life. So even if the meaning and significance of something changes for me over time, I know that at one point, at least in my life, it was a very important and meaningful thing. And so there's a record of that on my body. So that's not a problem for me. But I think what's more important from an aesthetic point of view is that if you go to a good artist and you get a really nice piece of art on you, ultimately you're going to have this great piece on you regardless of the meaning behind it or how that meaning changes over time. So if you take the time to get a good artist to do a good tattoo, you're going to have something that looks great on your body regardless of anything else. The aesthetic is still going to be there. It's still going to be a visually appealing thing. So I don't think it's a problem if the meaning behind that changes. I think that that piece of artwork is hopefully still going to look good. It's still going to make you happy when you see it down the road. So that's it for those first two reasons. If you have any other reasons that people tend to argue against getting tattoos, if you yourself are anti-tattoo and have reasons for it that aren't religious based, let me know in the comments below and I'd be curious to hear those. In the next video, you'll get to see a slightly tribal influenced armband. Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really proud of the... Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really proud of the work I put into making this video, and I would be the world to... And... in this, or whatever else, or what other really, or what other no-brainers there are out there, but just no. I clearly recall, is your physical experience, is your physical, now this is, you got the, it just looked like this kind of blotchy, fade, black and gray piece, whereas it was supposed to be a solid black, but it was sort of various. It did end. How do you know that this thing which is meaningful how do you know that this thing which is meaningful that the meaning has sort of changed as time has gone? That the meaning has... You'll see my second tattoo, which is also a little bit cringe-worthy, in my next video, but to finish up this video, we'll look at that second issue that most people use to argue against getting tattoos, which is... I forget what it is.